Hi everyone, today I'm going to talk about relative clauses, the second part 2 I've written here, essential and non-essential clauses, or restrictive or non-restrictive clauses, which we call. Today we will touch a very important point, which is also given in tests as a question. From the first lesson, you know that relative clauses of the following expressions: who, which, that, when, where, reason why, whom, whose. Today we will learn in which context they mean something important, in which context they mean something additional. Let's look at this sentence now. My friend who has studied abroad now. My friend has studied abroad now, lives in, for example, lives in Baku. Let's analyze this sentence. Imagine you are in an interview and they ask the question about somebody, for example, your friend or somebody you know, who has studied, who has got experience or studying abroad and lives in your country, in Baku, for example, and you just talk about that person, give detailed information. You see, since you are asked to describe person that you know who has studied abroad and lives somewhere else, or maybe in your country or abroad, so they need to hear detailed information from you about regarding the question. So in this context, what we see to describe, to answer the question is important. In this case, we say, but this part becomes important part because we are meant to describe all the details here. Because we are asked about a person to describe who has studied abroad and live in the country. So we need to give detailed information to be clear. In this case, this part, which is relative clause, becomes our essential clause. This essential clause. In this case, essential clause. And essential clause, and the rest, rest is, let's write here main clause first, or principal clause, main clause, or principal clause. Principal clause. In this case, what we see here is also as important as rest of the sentence, or as important as main clause. It means without essential clause in the sentence, if you remove it from the sentence, you will lose the meaning. So you have to keep it there to be so clear to somebody asking you about the question. So because you were asked about the friend, and you are meant to describe your friend, his experience, for example, in details. So whatever you say in detail, because you are asked, so whatever you say by the help of essential clause in a complex sentence becomes as important as the rest of the sentence. So we call this essential clause, or we also call it relative clause. Essential clause or a restrictive clause, or restrictive clause. Restrictive clause. And in writing, we do not write anything here to show, we do not leave in any punctuation marks. Nothing written if relative clause is essential clause. So we can also not touch anything in this sentence. We have to keep it till the end. This part remains here. So important notation is that since essential clause is as important as main clause, we can also interchange them, or we can also say in this way: my friend who now lives in Baku has studied abroad. So if essential clause is as important as rest of the sentence, we can interchange them. So this part, so we can again write the sentence as follows. So my friend who now lives in Baku, has studied abroad. So in this case we can make this shift. So this is when information here is so important, and then in this case we call this essential clause or restrictive clause and keep this sentence here. So this is essential clause, the brief definition of essential clause in a sentence. So now let's close it now and move on to non-essential clause. Like, by the way, like who, we can also say the same thing for which or other relative clauses. They all follow the same principles, fundamental principles. Now, imagine you are asked about, for example, somebody living abroad, from your relatives or your friends, somebody you know. That's right. For you, just remember your friend, say my friend. And let's write the sentence again. Who has, this time I'm writing this part in different color, studied abroad. Now listen Baku. But this time you are just asked about your friend or somebody. Let me change it, let me write different. For example, in Japan. So somebody living abroad. Just question is about somebody you know living abroad. And you know that you just got a question about somebody you know living abroad. So what we're going to say as an additional fact about the person is just additional information. So it's not part of the question, the fundamental of question. So here, whatever you say additionally, which was not asked, becomes or is expressed through non-essential clause, or is called non-essential clause in complex sentence. In this case, since we put the question in a way that you are asked about somebody you know living abroad, so whatever you say about that person becomes just additional fact. So in writing, in this case, we call this additional fact about that person is called non-essential clause or expressed. This relative clause actually is called non-essential clause or non-restrictive clause, and this time, in order to show that it is non-essential clause, we put here a pair of commas before relative pronoun, because you know it's also relative pronoun. We call this relative pronoun. We write first comma before relative pronoun and the other one when relative clause finishes. So as if we border it. And by the pair of, for example, commas, we show that this is non-essential clause that has just been added there and doesn't bear any essence in terms of the core meaning of the sentence. So like pair of commas, in order to show that this is non-essential clause, we can also write a pair of dashes. So instead of pair of commas, we can also write a pair of dashes. So this this pair of punctuation marks mean the same thing, and you are so free in choosing which pair you write there. But important notation is that with whatever you begin, you have to finish with the same thing. It means if you begin with comma, a pair of comma, you also finish with comma here. But if you begin with dash, you also finish with dash. And it also means whenever you want, you can remove this non-essential clause from your complex sentence. The good news is that since it is additional fact, you will not lose anything from the essence of essential meaning of the sentence. So the sentence will mean the same thing. So okay, since you got a question just about somebody living abroad, if you just say, my friend now lives in somebody, you just say somebody's your friend's name and say that now lives abroad, and Japan. If you say just Japan like this, it will be okay. But this is just additional information here. Okay, this is non-essential or non-restrictive clause in this case. But in SAT, what we prefer is that since it is non-essential clause or can also be who or which, essentially, they also show that if something is non-essential clause, we can write with them a pair of commas or pair of dashes. In SAT, we prefer to use these phrases with a pair of commas or pair of dashes in non-essential situation. But I wouldn't say it's always true, but in most cases it is preferable. And if you ask me what we use in for essential clause to show that what we say is completely essential, then we use just that. This is, in most cases, it sounds true, but it doesn't mean it's the only way. As I said, like I said before, it's also true. When you write punctuation marks, you show that it's non-essential. When you do not write, you show that it's essential clause. But this partition, let's say, is good to determine that if it's essential clause, just prefer that in academic context. For example, my friend that has studied abroad now lives in Canada. Now lives in Japan. I've written here, Japan. So if we begin a relative clause with that, we mean that this part is essential clause, like the part I wrote in red. This is essential clause that we cannot remove it. And also, one more fact is that we cannot write any punctuation marks, as you know, around it. So here we understand when we use that. First, we do not write. Let me write here. First, when we use that, don't use any punctuation marks around that. And two, if we use if that is used, it is essential clause. So that's all. And this is all about essential, non-essential clauses. Now I want to finish the video here. Next time I will explain relative clause 3 for different purpose. See you later, guys.